looks like we're seeing YouTube comments on here.
Are we on the wrong page? What are you saying?
You could. It'll start soon.
I think it says live.
Yeah, there's a delay, so it'll just take a second. We'll start. They're rolling in now.
And if you have your phone that you're not using, turn its volume down.
Yes, did that.
Okay. Is everybody seeing us, you guys? Hi. Sorry. We have, you guys know Dixie and George are playing in the background here, so there's going to be a quick dealing of they're on a Substack playing on Substack starts and our two dogs start wrestling. That's the way it goes. Hey, it's not a network. So, I just want to thank you guys for showing up tonight. Just get another 30 seconds or so before we start, so everybody can start listening in. I think you hear the dogs in the background. You hear them downstairs? Just put them outside. Put them outside in the farm in the dark by themselves with the bears. So I'm just going to introduce you guys. We're here tonight with Rye Howard-Stone, who, the easiest way to explain his journey is that, Rye started this work. Sorry, I said Ryan. I shouldn't have said that. It's Rye Howard-Stone. Sorry, it just rolled off my tongue. Rye Howard-Stone, and Rye is a computer scientist who has a PhD in computer science, and you have an undergraduate degree in physics as well as mathematics. So suffice to say, you're smarter than me.
I don't think there's an easy way to do that.
With the old journalism degree, boy, oh boy, do you not want to put that up against a math, computer science, and physics degree. But anyways, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about how Rye and I got hooked up. Rye and I started kind of talking back and forth a little bit, I think last week. And I was following his stuff, and I don't know if he was following mine, but we were connecting. And as we were connecting, we started talking to each other and trying to link up. We finally were able to link up, and we started talking about ideas of what we could do together, collaborate. And, we kind of realized that, the storytelling aspect of what I do might enhance and the reporting aspect of what I do might enhance the work that he does digging into the data. And that's sort of like, we're going to make this like a little combination thing that we're going to do on a weekly basis. And tonight's the first thing. So I just wanted to get started by having Rye just tell you a little bit about himself. So give me a little bit about your background and how you got involved in all this.
So I've just graduated with a PhD finally after 6 years from UConn in bioinformatics is the field. So it's sort of the data science around biology. And, I'm looking for a job, sending 200 applications, hearing from one back, getting one interview from that. And then at the same time,
I just have to stop. You put out 200 applications with your background in education. It must be the beard.
I didn't even have the beard. There's no headshot. They don't even know.
And so because of that, you had like a lot of time on your hands.
Yes, exactly. So, and they dumped these 3 million documents out to the public. And I just think, well, I started seeing crazy things on social media. They're eating the babies and things. And I just had to look. And then they're saying other things that seem more plausible, but also crazy. And I just had to be able to sort of sort the fact from fiction for myself. And so I started digging into the data. And I realized very quickly, well, the average journalist or person looking into this doesn't have the kind of skills that I have. They can't run OCR on 3 million documents. That's a terrifying phrase. Yeah. For me, it's 218 gigs of data is nothing. Right. This was
most journalists don't know what 218 gigs of data actually means.
Yeah, well, we'll see when they release the full tranche.
Yeah.
But I just thought like there was something I could do here that could really help people. Help the journalists uncover the stories. I'm not an investigative journalist. I'm not a forensics expert. I'm really more of a data science.
But you knew right away that this is so voluminous that what they would be doing if you weren't doing what you're doing. It just explains.
So it felt like somebody should have been doing this. It's how it should have been released. They call it the Epstein library or something. And it's just a single keyword search where you just have to know exactly what you're looking for and then paginate through these this awkward interface. So, I knew I could do better than that.
Yeah, and most journalists are like, when stuff comes out, they literally would do like I might do, which is I hate to admit this, but that's what they're doing. They're and I won't even mention names, but we know who they are. They're pulling something up, they're looking at that document right on the screen in front of them. They're opening that document and they're reading those 1 or 3 sentences for some clue that might link to the next one or the next one, or something that might not come out for a year from now, right?
Right. And this story it doesn't occur in a vacuum. Any individual one of these documents only proves that document says what it says. There are any number of circumstances why other documents in the corpus may discredit something that said earlier or expand upon it. And it's just impossible to know without really sorting through, the data on a large scale.
Yeah. So when I found you, you had like, you had 100 subscribers. So the people who were looking at your stuff, what occurred to me is, and I knew the reason you had 100 subscribers, because when you look at your stuff and the data sets and stuff you're putting out, it's very inside baseball in terms of data. I mean, probably to you and many of the people, your 100 subscribers, that's probably the amount of people in a certain few weeks really even understand it. So they're looking at it, and they're going right by it. And they're going to the stuff that says, here's what these documents said. We saw Elon Musk's name today, and here's what he said. Right. And so you're working in this sort of like inside baseball realm where you're going deep diving into stuff. And when you're putting it out there, it's going to a certain person who understands how to look at that set, right?
Right. That was the intent. Sort of, it's not the final report. It's document 0. It's the thing that we're going to build off of in order to tell the full stories.
Right. And and just so everybody knows, his Substack, and I'm going to say this a couple times throughout this evening, but his Substack's actually called Document 0 with Rye Howard-Stone. And, by the way, get on out there and subscribe to him. And if you like what he's doing, hit the paid button like you've been doing for me, because he and I are going to be collaborating, and the stuff I'll be talking about, stuff will also be on his page. So, that's just something that's my used car salesman plug for the beginning of the evening, and there'll be more. But tell us how you do this work, and try to break it down like I'm a 3-year-old who literally is looking at my Atari PlayStation.
Okay. So I essentially tried to get all of the data that we have. So all the PDFs, all the spreadsheets, image files, loads of different things in their video, audio transcripts, into a way that my AI agents and journalists could really digest. So I use Claude from Anthropic. I know people don't really like it.
For all you guys, don't even go there yet. For all you guys who are not into AI and you're a rookie like me, and some of you probably are deep divers, Claude is basically an AI assistant that you can work alongside and with. And actually, you actually call Claude a specific name when I first talked to you the first time. And I kind of chuckled internally.
Yeah, it's basically my research assistant, I would say, somewhere, or intern. It's hard to exactly classify its role. It's sort of a generalist genius in so many different fields. And I've seen it, with my PhD work. I know what it's capable of in fields that I am, well educated in.
Right.
So I knew that it could extend my reach and abilities here as well.
So what did you first start, like the day you decided I'm not going to do the resume right now, I'm going to start delving into this. What did you say to yourself? Like, okay, right now, the first set of documents I'm going to go into, what am I going to do with them? What did you do?
Oh, well, I mean, it wasn't quite so clean as that. Of course, I was still applying while I was doing it in the background. But
for producers to try to make the story sound more simple than it is.
Fair enough. I ran across, there was a diary, I guess, or a trauma journal or something. It's written, I'm sure people who've looked into this have seen it. There's a few of them. It's written in like code. So the girl has written, one letter up here and then down and then one over and up.
And she's 13 years old.
I think that's the 13-year-old's diary.
Right. Go ahead.
And there are these like newspaper clippings that are cut out that's like, placed in as parts of words. And I mean, just forget how chilling it is. Forget how chilling it is to view something that's written that way. The actual content was some of probably the most horrific things I've ever read in my life.
Yeah,
there was one page where.
Let me just do a disclaimer here. and I have to say this, and today Ryan and I talked about this a little bit before this. We talked about it this morning. You know, for people here to care about, for people here to care about these victims and what they've gone through, parts of their story we have to tell. And the reason we're going to do that is because the more you understand about what they've gone through and the trauma they're dealing with, the more you're going to care about this story. Trust me. And, you know, we're going to try to not be salacious with it in any way. We're going to try to be careful with it. But we want you to understand the kind of shit these fucking people put these young ladies through. So with that as a caveat, tell me the first thing you read in that diary.
So this girl was alone. She had a miscarriage in the toilet. She flushed it. And then she blamed herself. First, she apologized to Jeffrey Epstein in her diary. And then she calls herself a monster, a killer. And these are clippings from newspapers along with this handwritten ghostly code. And I mean, I just, after feeling sort of angrier than I've ever felt, I knew I not only could I do something, but I had to do something, that whatever skills that I had, if they were going to be useful here, I had to try. Yeah. I don't know if I was just going to be screaming into the comment void, but, it's going to take every person of conscience, I think, to even have a snowball's chance in hell of making a dent in this system. And that was the moment that I knew that, I had to contribute in some way.
And by the way, that was like a month ago.
It was only like a month ago. Yeah. 5 weeks now.
Yeah. And that's the thing about this. I mean, like, I'm coming to this late too. I talked to a lot of people in the last few weeks who are following me. They're going to say, when are you going to talk about this case? When are you going to talk about that case? And I say to them, there's been reporters, there's a reporter at the Miami Herald who has been covering the story for years and years and years and knows every inside and outside detail of this. And for me to contribute to that argument, to the discussion of what's going on with any clarity, for me felt like something I wasn't equipped to do. And so I stuck to the things I was equipped to do. But because you are delving into the data, you were doing something you were very equipped to do, despite the fact that you were looking at documents that were horrific to you, right?
Yeah, that was one of the ones that was particularly difficult for the machine to read for me. I'm able to use the AI assistant to sort of summarize and go through documents so I don't have to read them in full detail and font. And that was one that, because it's written in code, it's not picked up by the algorithms very easily. So I, just one of the first ones I opened and looked at with my own eyes, and I'm never going to forget that my whole life. I mean, it really was, we've run out of words in English: despicable, horrible, horrific. I mean, we don't really have the words to describe what these men were like.
And the interesting thing is that, again, there was roughly 1,000 victims, maybe more. And we don't know how many perpetrators there are at this point, do we?
No, that appears to be, I think the word cover up is getting thrown around a lot lately, but, some of it's a poor cover up and some of it is locked down a little bit more tightly. I think the names of the perpetrators is one of the latter.
Well, let's talk about some of the projects you've been working on. Okay. Sure. And we'll talk about future stuff that we're going to do. Just so you guys know, Rye's going to be coming down soon, and we're going to be working together at the writer's cabin, and he's going to pick out one of his own cabins to live in so he can stay away from me and Georgie. And we're going to continue every day to kind of look at stuff and determine what we think could make an interesting story that would help move this along. So there's two roles here. One is the storytelling role, so people understand it better. And one is the accountability role. So if we can do those two things while we're working together, I think we can further this some. And I think I'll be helpful on the storytelling side. And Rye can actually help me delve into the data side where those stories reveal themselves. If I ask the right questions, if we ask the right questions, right? Because that's what you're learning as you're looking at the data, right? You're learning that it's all about, as AI is, it's all about the specifics of how you talk to it and how it responds to you.
Right. It's about enumerating your goals in a way that the machine can understand, that Claude can understand, really being specific about how you want to look at what you want to look at and why.
Okay. So let's talk about these files. These files, where do they live?
So I have a website that hosts like sort of my analysis, epstein-data.com. But they're on the DOJ's website, most of them still, some of them altered.
And if they alter them or take them off, you've already at that point, like you grab them before they can mess with them, right?
Oh, thousands of people have grabbed the original documents. I have a copy as well.
Yeah. And so you then take those, transfer them to your system, right? And I'm imagining you're putting them on a multiple hard drives, like backups and all that kind of stuff. And
it's in the server. I could take further backups, but yeah, I do have at least 2 copies.
Yeah. So there's somewhere. Let's just say there's somewhere.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah, let's just say, but you have somewhere these things in your possession, and each day you wake up. What's your day like? What do you do when you get up in the morning? You get up early? Are you an early riser?
Yeah, usually wake up around, I don't know, my body doesn't let me sleep past 7, feed the dog, let him out. I pretty much, maybe I'll work out in the morning and then I'll get down to this, get distracted from the workout to do this. It's just...
You set a schedule for yourself the night before, a day of, or anything like that?
No, I should be much more diligent. I wasn't taking my own self all too seriously during the beginning of this. It was, I got to get back to job applications, but yeah, I'm really making some sort of headway here.
So what kinds of, now that you're into it and you're a month into it, tell us, and by the way, if you go to Rye's Substack, you can see all of his notes. I guess they call them on Substack as opposed to posts. You can see all his notes, and you can literally go through and look at his work, and whatever your interest level is, it's going to be there for the last month, everything he's done. But why don't you walk us through a little bit of what you've assembled?
Sure. So the Substack is the really forward-facing element. Those are things that I've taken more time to translate from Claude's initial drafts into initial reports into something that humans can digest a little bit more easily. And that's where I clearly need help with your storytelling prowess, because it's still not telling quite a narrative, but they are a litany of issues for sure, just the ones on the Substack.
Go through some of them.
So the alteration analysis, we'll start with the gallery of the absurd, I call it, which was when they took down documents. I counted about 64,000. I heard another report where they must have run a similar analysis as me, and it was 47,000. It was very difficult to do. They don't make it easy to even check these things. But thousands, tens of thousands of documents were taken down. And so I started looking through some of them, and they're just absurd. There's one that's a password reset. There's one, they're scheduling a dentist appointment. There's a bunch of Google Calendar reminders. There's just a hallway from, I think, the New York property. Strange things, a desk.
Things that they literally took away.
They took them down. I think most of them are back now. But I stored all the OCR text, the characters that I could extract from the images, so people could always look back at least the textual documents. But I found that a lot of just regular images were taken down too. So I wanted to look at those by eye.
And what did you see when some of them were just very innocuous? But
yeah, there's weird ones. There's a photograph of Mick Jagger and Bill Clinton with a woman whose face is redacted in between them. Mm-hmm. I don't think you could really tell who it was from what was unredacted of that woman, but to be safe, I added an extra redaction bar around her. There's his Wikipedia printout was taken down. Jeffrey Epstein's Wikipedia page was, made it into the files somewhere, an older version of it. And they took that down, and they've put it back up now with the only things missing being Virginia Giuffre's name. It's public information to begin with. That to me says they're doing a keyword search on victims, which is good. They should do that. They should have done that months ago before they released the things. But that they don't even have a white list for the victims who wanted to be known.
Right. And so let's talk about some other data sets that you put together and some other databases.
So after they took them down, I started, we noticed that they had returned a lot of things. There's another report, I don't know, it's an anonymous person, but I found their data to be quite accurate of, I think it was 47,000 returned documents. So I went from absence to alteration. Let's look at what changed between left and right. And a lot of it was reasonable, redacting victims' names, identifiable information, PII, personally identifiable information.
So at first they put it up with this stuff in it, is the point, right?
Right. Yeah.
So they put it up there with a lot of personal identifiable information, and then somebody alerted them to that, and then they took it down and went back through the redaction process. In other words, what it does confirm to us is that they're not fucking doing it right the first time.
Yeah, and it's not that hard once you have the victim name. So I discovered this myself. Somebody pointed me at it, and I found that in my website and my data analysis had included the names of the victims because that's what the DOJ gave us. Yeah, I didn't know what to look for. So as soon as I found that, it was a 6-hour hair pulling exercise to sort of spider out. So I found a list of victims, and I was able to use sort of keywords to build my own internal inventory of names and pieces of information that needed to be withheld. And then since I don't store the PDFs or images on my website, it's text only for now. I was able to very quickly go through and, reverse search all these pieces of information to find other documents that might include those emails, those dates of birth, so that I could redact that information. And it's probably not still perfect, but the hard part of that was getting the list, was getting the personally identifiable information that needed to be removed. The DOJ had that the whole time. This was a keyword search from them in January before they released the 3 million documents.
In other words, they knew what they were trying to redact, and you were trying to figure that out because you needed to redact it. And so they had this information, and even with this information, they spent months, right, trying to redact these names incorrectly, and you did it in 6 hours for the documents in your possession.
As well as I could, yeah.
So what does that tell you?
That's not their priority. That they don't really care about protecting the victims' names. If they put any kind of precedent on that, it would have been done before the documents came out, because it's not hard to do.
Yeah, because they have as much access to Anthropic as you do.
Right. For another 6 months, I guess, until it's a supply chain risk, right?
Oh, yeah. You worry about that?
I fear for Anthropic. I wonder, I just, it's strange for little old me to be wondering about their, bottom line, but they are the only AI company that I've found that really lives up to what needs to be done with ethics in AI. They have so many intense protocols, ethicists and things that work on this. They broke away, the founders broke away from OpenAI because they were afraid of what they were seeing over there. And they wanted, one of these super intelligences that we may one day create or are creating to be on our side, as humans. And I think they've succeeded with Claude. That's my gut feeling anyway.
Now, I think the folks on here right now are going to be really interested in this one next thing we talked about. You had a post on here on Substack where you said, here is who they need to subpoena in the order which they should subpoena them, with associated witness profiles, all linking back to original DOJ Epstein documents with evidence. Tell me about that. And I know that, when we talked about it this morning, you said that was just, you did that out of anger.
I was pissed off. That wasn't the most level-headed post that I've ever made. I usually try to not sound arrogant and not, do people's job for them and then put it in their face. But
tell me what you did and how you went about it.
Essentially, I explained to Claude, I had a conversation before it went off and wrote the first draft of, okay, let's think through like a lawyer, like a prosecutor. What do they need? What order do people go in? Do we get at the big names first, or do we sort of work our way in? That was my suspicion, is they get at sort of the ancillary characters first, so that by the time they get up the ladder, they really have as much evidence as they can arm themselves with. So I just wanted to create a little roadmap. If Congress is stalling because they don't know who to subpoena, or they don't have exactly where in the documents it says I don't want to call it evidence against them, but the things that need to be answered about.
Yeah.
Yeah, things that they need to have questions asked about.
And you did this because you were looking at all this evidence and you were seeing all this evidence, and it was frustrating you because you were watching the political process play itself out at a snail's pace.
Yeah, I mean, to Congress's credit, a lot of them have gone through into the reading room and read the things, but they're being delayed. You know, there's some time limit, I think, and then there's only 4 terminals in there, only 4 computers. So if I could help speed them along.
The thought is that if every member of Congress who was interested in signing the petition would go in there to research it, they'd be 7 years looking at the data.
Something like that.
Yeah. And so you obviously to you, you're like, what the fuck? I mean, this is going too slow. And this is what they need to know. So you literally had Claude put together a list of people that should be from the bottom up subpoenaed. And did you even go through what they should be talking to those particular people about and why the witnesses?
Some of them. So my plan with that particular report is to build off of it. I have 2 auxiliary reports to that. One for Richard Kahn, who was actually deposed today. And then,
if you say a name, explain who they are.
Oh, it was his accountant. So he's one of them.
Right.
Yeah, he was one of the deepest people that's mentioned in thousands of documents, 68,000 hits.
Yeah.
And then the other one was Darren Indyke, which is his lawyer. So those are the first 2 that are listed. They've both been subpoenaed. So, you know, Richard Kahn was deposed today. I think Darren Indyke is coming up soon. But my plan with that guide, the Congressional Subpoena Guide, is to build it out person by person. So I'm starting at the top. I think Pam Bondi would be next. And that's more of a question of institutional failures than what actually exists in the content of the files. But I want to do anything I can to help. And I have access to a lot of different sort of organized, structured versions of this data now. So it's pretty easy for me to pull things out.
Right. So you could, like, if a congressman said, like, hey, Rye, I know you've been digging through this data. You know, are there 15 people you think we should subpoena and why we should subpoena them? You'd say, I'll send the file right over.
I'd say go to this report. That's pretty much that answer. Yeah.
Yeah. That's, to me, I think a lot of people on here right now would find that extraordinary, that a guy who just finished his doctorate, who's looking for a job and nobody's calling back, right? Because I don't know, it's a crazy market. You have incredible skills, and there you are sitting and you got this little, you know, you got this little dog sitting next to you, and you're just going through the millions of Epstein files. You and Claude just hammering away, and you're coming up with stuff that could help expose some of these perpetrators. So let's talk about them a little bit. What do we know about them?
About the perpetrators, not a whole lot that's confirmed.
Because obviously they're redacted, right? With greater care, would you say, than the victims?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. The victims, you throw a stone in these files, you'll come across a victim. You have to go hunting the magnifying glass through these files to find anything definitive that names anything negative about somebody with money or power. It's been very frustrating, but that's sort of how this Congressional Subpoena Guide came to be. Is there is information in there that maybe not names anyone as certainly a perpetrator, certainly did anything. There are named co-defendants on earlier cases, but it's certainly enough for them to be brought in for questioning.
Yeah, and there are, the redactions are, even though they're redacted, there's still a lot of files that have lots of information about what those perpetrators might have done, right?
Right. So it was, if it also is a cover up of them trying to protect the rich and powerful, it's also a bad cover up like the rest of them. Because there's still things that slip through for sure.
So you were telling me this morning that you started seeing a pattern through your database building, which was when people were already named in some capacity, maybe they were a potential witness or a potential, maybe let's just say the Clintons or something, whatever. If somebody was in there and their names had gotten out, then the documents that came out after it seemed to be about those sets of people more so than it did new people coming out, right? Am I characterizing that accurately, or how would you
So
characterize?
what I was finding is is a little bit more narrow than that. It's the names that are getting redacted or unredacted. So you know, in this alteration analysis, or I'm looking at what they had and now what they post. This Karina Shuliak and Leslie Groff are often unredacted in the new files,
And
where
they
they
are?
were redacted before.
And they are.
Leslie Groff is the assistant.
Yeah.
And Karina Shuliak was the girlfriend who called him, I believe, 2 hours before his death. They spoke.
Mhm.
And she's in the will. I think well, it's hard to say exactly what the final version of the probate documents were, just from what we have. But she was named in his will.
And so you were seeing those names become more recurring as they release new files, right?
Right. Yeah. You see those names unredacted. And then meanwhile, you see like Villafania, I think it's Anne Marie, it's the first name, the lead prosecutor on the case, I believe, that ended up with the NPA deal in 2008, Sweetheart Non-Prosecution Agreement. Her name has been stripped from bunches of pages, including a signature page for, I don't think it was the NPA itself. It was in 2019, the last criminal case they had on him. And, you know, Jason Swergold, who was also AUSA.
So basically, what does that tell you? They didn't want you to see their names because they didn't want you to readily be able to find these people and talk to them.
I guess, yeah. If we're putting our tinfoil hat on there, I guess that it's like they just don't want you to know the names of the government officials that were involved. It's explicitly prohibited to do that, by the way, in the law, the EFTA. But if we're sort of thinking, why would you redact those things? It would be so that it's harder to search them, find them, and ask them questions about the documents their names appear on.
And some of those people may not be in government anymore. Some may be working at law firms, and some may be, you know, older or retired, whatever. But they might not be working for the government. There would be nothing with the release of the Epstein Files that would prevent a reporter, for instance, from tracking those people down and finding them and trying to make an attempt to speak with them about something. And so for me, that's a red flag. To me, that jumps out and says, we have to find these people and ask them why they signed off on this. What did they think that they knew that we don't know about this case that they thought, you know, it's the same thing like as when Kash Patel, our FBI director, was standing in front of Congress, and they said, you know, why aren't there any prosecutions? And he basically said, well, if I thought there was a single case that warranted enough evidence to have a prosecution, I'd prosecute him tomorrow, right? Something along those lines, what he said. And we know that now not to be true, because what he didn't predict is that they would pass a law that would require the release of all the documents. Mm-hmm. He didn't know that at the time. The timeline oftentimes shows you a lot of things in these kinds of cases, especially journalistically. The timeline it was before the law was passed. He said this crazy garbage because he never thought the documents would see the light of day. Okay. And then they passed the law, and that's when everybody started freaking out, right? You've got Mike Johnson literally having a conniption fit while trying to act calm. You have the president who committed to releasing these files in the last election, literally saying, but he was kind of, yeah, I think I'll release them. I think it'd be a good idea, knowing that he was never going to release them, but also not even considering the idea that Congress would pass a law. And if they passed the law and he didn't sign it, then it would really be a scandal. So he signed it, and he spent a lot of time telling people after he signed it, do not fucking release any of this shit and keep all the people that work underneath me. This is my opinion here, Rye. So you just let me roll on this one. But now that he's signed it, he literally will go back to all these people and tell them we're stonewalling all this stuff. And and it went with like Marjorie Taylor Greene. It went down to Lauren Boebert, where they brought her into the White House and tried to convince her not to vote on this legislation, and because it was such a close vote. And now you're into Thomas Massey, who I saw on one of the podcasts today. I wish I could remember which one it was, but where he's laughing when they're talking to him, because he said, yeah, I was on the floor getting ready to vote, and I saw my phone ring 3 times. I keep hanging it up, but I figured it might be the president, because the president probably one of the only people in the world that can get a phone number that has 4 00s at the end. So I called the White House back, and they put me through to him immediately, and he started screaming at me and yelling at me. He was going to rain more terror down on him than he could ever possibly imagine was going to happen. Now, that doesn't sound like a guy who wants to release the Epstein Files to me. And so this is when we talk about the idea of a cover-up. I mean, it's me and you seeing what we see in front of us, deciding that. What does Claude say about it?
I have tried not to go directly to the. I noticed early on, particularly as I was validating some of these conspiracy theories, on Instagram was really the worst offender. That Claude, like any of us, can become conspiratorial.
Mm-hmm.
It can start drawing inferences where there are none. And I really didn't want that. I've had good experience with Claude working as a scientist. And I wanted it to continue with that level of rigor. So I haven't, and now I guess we have enough information that I really can just, have it speculate, hypothesize, if all of this is not just coincidence, but in fact pattern, what does that pattern tell us? I suspect it would say very much what we're saying.
It's a speculative game, and I don't necessarily want to go down that road either, but I was curious as to whether you had or not. And I know that a lot of people were writing me today about stuff that we were putting out. And I was just putting out, like, you and I are going to be on talking about this. And one guy said, well, yeah, Claude said this and it was, garbage, blah, 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 and didn't come out with the right answer or something. I can't remember the exact quote, and I said, well, that's why it's really important to have a data scientist with a PhD in computer science that's working on this project, because you inevitably, right, are going to look for patterns that could be erroneous. And you're going to be looking, how do you weed out stuff that you think is wrong?
Well, I try not to make any inferences. It's just, this is what the document says. This is what type of document it was, and maybe if it's an email, who sent it, or whatever other sort of associated metadata we can grab out of it, and then try to let the individual facts get pieced together into a narrative in these reports as best as Claude and I can do. And then I hope that journalists are looking at this and trying to tease out stories from some of these reports. But to be clear, it's not like, I'm not like plugging it into the Claude web interface. It's not like ChatGPT where you go on and say, hey, what did Jeffrey Epstein do? This is an autonomous AI agent. So it can write code, it can run programs. I can leave it to run for half an hour and it will make files, search the database, bring up relevant things. It's a much more holistic program than just like if you go to claude.ai and chat with it.
Yeah, and you go and you say, tell me what the president of Iran said today about, Donald Trump. That's the kind of use that a lot of Americans are using right now. They're using it as a quick answer because they don't want to Google it and whatever. But you're using it as a research tool that, right, like you said, you can give it a set of data and give it a job and walk away and come back and see the results of that, and then augment that with new instructions.
Correct. So I'll spot check the reports. I at least skim through every single one to make sure that there's nothing like egregious. And then I'll, choose a few citations and points to delve deeply on and verify that it is exactly what is described. If I find any errors, and I haven't actually for quite some time now, I'll direct Claude to, hey, this is wrong in this way. Please go back and see if there are any other issues of this type and correct those as well. And then as part of the pipeline, just by default, it does a fact check. So it, in basic terms, it builds a scratch pad to begin with, just a throwaway document where it's like all of the hits that it's getting on a given topic, and it'll build that. And then when it's ready, it writes the full report, which is a draft. And then the pipeline has it do internal and external fact-checking validation. So it goes back through every single citation from the corpus, the set of documents, and it will try to find other reporting externally to link that either back up or fill in gaps of what we're saying. And so, usually after one pass, it's coming back with, oh, these are minor rephrasings. There was a typo here or something, but nothing substantial, not in weeks.
But some of the personal identifiable information that's come out is quite substantial. I mean, you've got phone numbers for like Noam Chomsky, and you know what I mean? Like it's crazy, like the amount of data that they did release. And is there any pattern that you've seen that shows any political leanings towards one group of people or the other?
I don't see one party being protected more than others. I don't think. Obviously there's one party.
Part of that's also because, Rye, that they're not releasing the names of all the perpetrators. So you can't kind of, that's part of it, right?
Right. So it would be hard to answer that question holistically, in full, because I only have whatever portion of the documents this is. But I have seen no evidence that the protection is happening on any kind of partisan basis. Now, obviously, there's one party in power right now who is running the DOJ.
You're holding what they're releasing. That's how you control it, right? You control the narrative by saying, oh, and let's not forget that they, I think I pointed you to this today. You were deep in the data the last month, but it's pretty clear that they pulled in FBI agents in New York, and they brought them to redact Donald Trump's name out of those files, and they spent $850,000 on overtime to make sure the president's name was redacted. So clearly, there's some politicking going on. But what you're saying is it's not wrong. It's what you're saying is different than what I'm saying. In other words, you're saying from the documents that are coming out, you can't see these political biases. And what I would say is that that's because they're controlling the documents that are coming out, right? So if we were to have if they were to have all the documents released to you right now, we might be able to see some pattern. And how do you? And there's no way at this point to triangulate perpetrators from what we have so far. We haven't figured that out yet.
Not exactly. And, if you were not convicted of a crime, you're innocent until proven guilty in this system. And I still believe that is the right way to approach things, even with mounting evidence to the contrary. For example, Sarah Kellen, Nadia Marchnikova, and Adriana Ross, who are immunized co-conspirators, were redacted from the co-conspirator lists. I'm able to see that. The side by side of what it was originally and what it is now. And those names are getting taken off, covered up, quite literally.
Do we have a sense, Rye, at this point? Because the numbers, the numbers I see everywhere are so different. Some people say it's 2%, 20%, 50% have been released. For one, do we have a better number now of the total that we think that they actually have in their possession? And do we have a number of what we think now that they've percentage-wise have actually released?
So by number of documents, the DOJ sent a letter claiming that there were 6 million responsive documents to this request. And they've released, I count, a little bit shy of 300 million pages over approximately 1.4 million documents. Many of them are multi-page.
So we're looking at about 20% have been a little bit.
It'll be about half, right? Yeah. So about 3 million out of.
No, you said 300 million pages.
Oh, sorry. No. They have 6 million redacted, 6 million responsive documents.
Uh-huh.
They have released about 3 million of them. Sorry,
3 million. 300? Yeah, you said 300. So we're looking at roughly half at this point. And any number of, like, say, 1,000 of those documents could be catastrophic, to somebody's reputation, right? They could hold this all. So our question that we have as journalists, which Rye probably thinks about too as a data scientist, is, how can you see a trend in how they're trickling out?
And how the data is trickling out? Well, I can tell you
you told me today that doesn't seem to be any organizational understanding for how they're doing anything.
Oh, well, it's certainly backwards, no matter how you want to look at it. But in terms of the documents that are, like Roger Sullenberger had the report on the secondary bait stamps. He was able to tell that the FBI had not released 302 interview forms for one of the Jane Does. And, lo and behold, whatever that is, a week, 2 later, maybe 3, it gets released.
Mr. Sullenberger broke that.
He did. He cited me. He cited my website on that article.
Because he used your website to do an exploration of the documentation?
Yeah. And I think the way that things were set up on there made it easier for him to find that, I think.
And he put the pieces together quite eloquently, might I add. And also the other thing he did, if you guys haven't seen his work, which I think you should, he was very careful about his assertions of what he said he could prove or not prove, or what the documents might have proven or not proven. He was very, very deliberate in that. And I think that's how, Rye and I will be approaching this stuff, is we want to make sure that we're saying what we know and not stepping beyond. I mean, when it comes to like war and conflict, and Donald Trump says, Tomahawk missiles were used by the Iranians to kill their own children in a school. I can say with certainty that the Iranians don't have Tomahawk missiles. So I can say with certainty that's bullshit and he's lying. But when it comes to this stuff, there's so many moving parts and so many pieces that need to be connected. We have to be absolutely journalistically careful as to how we characterize anything we bring together, even though the database might bring suggestions. It also, you could also follow yourself down the wrong path if you're not careful, right? Are you aware of that all the time?
Oh yeah, acutely. There's a disclaimer now on every report, both at the top and the bottom. I just had it on the bottom before. That's, this is an AI generated report. It's been iteratively fact checked against the documents, but they can still make errors, and so can humans, by the way. But any of this, the way I write all these reports is that it links back to the source documents. So you don't have to take my word for it or Claude's word for it. It's written to be cited, to be followed up on.
Basically, these electronic footnotes, if you will, right? So you can go. So anybody tonight, let's just talk about what people can do with your database. Tell me what a guy like me who doesn't know shit from Shinola can do tonight if I wanted to look into one of your databases. How would I go about doing it? I'm not a database guy. I don't know anything about how to explore a database. How do I go about doing that? How do you walk me through that?
So if you go to epstein-data.com, I have my screen. Are you able to share it?
Yeah, I think so. Try it.
It's shared. It says Rise Screen Landscape.
Let's see. Oh yeah, hold on. Yeah, sorry. Add stage.
Okay, here we go.
There you go. Look at that. I'm a genius. You're walking me through it all. You even know what's on my side. Okay. Watch out, people. He's going to be picking your bank account soon.
No.
Right.
So there's a bunch of different ways you can search here. This is the just Ask AI button, which is not Claude. It's a free AI that I can get. I think 1,000 people get to ask a question every day, and then I cut it off because I don't want to be paying in exorbitant API costs. But if you want to say what happened at Sorrow Ranch, and I guess it won't matter if you mistype things. It'll fix out simple things.
If only he were here every night when I was writing the summaries to my reels.
It's very well. Some of those you want, I don't know, the human touch, but this is certainly a good way to just get at information. So it comes back and says, based on the search results, we have the address of it, and it'll link to all these source documents that you can go and
find all the stuff that they're asking about through your database that you created, and then shows you to those prompts, which they can then open to the source documents themselves. That's pretty fucking, that's pretty easy peasy. And I think that part of what we're doing here, you keep looking at stuff, but I think what is hard for people, a lot of people that are looking at my page are like my age, right? And they're older, and we were like playing Pong back in the day. You know what I mean? Atari was our video game, and Pong and Space Invaders. And so when we think about this new generation of computing, it's very intimidating. And what you're showing our viewers who are very interested in this story in particular is that you and others around the country have these databases. They need to start looking for people like yourself that not only can help them understand it through your databases you're building, but that it's not that difficult once they get inside the document itself. Like, just show us. It's like right there in front of you, right?
Right.
Do another search. You could do, searches for the name Trump in it, right?
So there are a number of different ways to access. This is the AI chat. It's sort of, if you don't know exactly where to look, you can just ask in general. So it's a very primitive version of what I run in the back end. But let's see if this loads, or it's a free version, so you get what you pay for with the AI chat. So yeah, there it goes. So it found 71 documents. So it's going to be a tough one, this one, because he occurs in a lot of documents, a lot more than 71.
They're
based on
out, literally tens of thousands, probably.
Right. So it looks like it got 71 matches across 63 documents and 8 investigation reports that I've already written up. Flight records. So it'll break it all down. And if you want it to come in a different format, search for the name Trump and then give it to me in these kinds of bullet points or ask these specific questions about it. And it'll come back with exactly, that framing. And then at the bottom, it'll link all the various reports. I thought there is.
That's when it gets a little difficult, because now you're looking at reports that are in numerical fashion and you have no real idea what they are unless you open them yourself, right?
Right. But you can go to the investigative reports section.
Yeah.
So if you browse all 173 reports here, you can go to this start here, which gives you somewhat of a table of contents. It might be a little out of date. But there's 173 of these, AI generated, human checked reports that include one specifically about Donald Trump, the investigative record, another one about Bill Clinton, not to leave anyone out. And there were lots of individual, things that it was finding. This one was, this report was actually not all too damning. There really isn't that much that's overtly damning in the documents about Trump. There are a lot of allegations. There are credible FBI interviews, but there's no smoking gun. There was, evidence that Epstein was dropping his name a lot. I guess Epstein was a name dropper. Surprise, surprise. So while he was on the phone with a 14-year-old girl giving him a massage, Epstein claimed to be on the phone with Donald Trump. That was one of the findings from this particular report. Another one was a victim had said that he's always on the phone with Trump and Clinton. We don't know if that's verifiable via the phone records. I've tried, and those are heavily redacted. But it's certainly,
that's, again, a very telling thing. If you're looking at that and you're like, oh, well, I'll just link to the records to see what they have, because obviously they're part of the investigative process, and they redact them out because they probably look at it under a FOIA exclusion of personally identifiable information. But in a criminal case that's been closed, these criminal cases have been, that's what the DOJ has said. These are closed criminal cases, which is the reason they can release the files in the first place. And the law itself does not permit the redactions of this stuff, right? I mean, only permits the redactions of the victims and information that would identify them.
There's a number of different carve-outs. I think 5. There's national security, victim information, ongoing cases. So
right.
There was one.
That's right. Those would all those exclusions you just named, Rye, are covered under FOIA. So in a FOIA exemption, the reasons they can exempt you, it used to be, I don't know if it's gained anymore since I've been doing a lot of FOIA stuff, but it used to be 9 exemptions. It might be 10 or 11 by now. National security was always one of them. Ongoing criminal investigations were always one of them. All the things you just named, and I imagine that they would probably, and that would be fine actually under the law. But like, what criminal investigations are still ongoing? That'd be I'd love to know.
So I found a few. There were the Alexander brothers, the Oren, and I can't remember the name. They get redacted in one of the new releases. It was taken down and then changed and put back up. Their names were taken off. I think they were just convicted.
That's right.
So
like
it's
a couple days ago, I think.
Right. So I mean, it was ongoing, I suppose, but it felt like, and this is not a data-driven answer so much, but it felt like there were a bunch of different teams, or maybe a few people hearing from a lot of different people's lawyers and demanding that they get taken down. And maybe they're just honestly trying to comply with all the people in their ears, but it's coming off awfully haphazard.
You were telling me earlier about the redactions. Some were done very carefully, and some were like, using like the paint.
I did see a couple of those. Yeah. Well, and Congress says that even when they go into the reading room to review the unredacted files, there are still redactions underneath that. Not to be too crazy making, but they're claiming that that's how it came to them at the FBI, at DOJ. So is that the grand jury level? I mean, who was redacting the redactions underneath? Who needs to be followed up with there? It's unbelievable that we'd live through something like this.
What have you found in the month that you've been working on this that has stunned you the most?
Stunned the most,
or surprised you the most? What really jumps at you and says, wow, this is something that, and it doesn't have to be a document. It could be just the idea of how they're going about something or the level of something.
It's actually a positive. It's how many people on the internet are honestly just committed to fighting this evil and trying to get the truth out in the light. I mean, there's all these, grandmas on, various platforms, and, I've connected with a few of them and spoken to them, and they're doing what I'm doing. They're doing this all day. And, I was really encouraged by that. There are a lot of people that are going into independent investigations, independent journalists, so if the main media isn't really delving deeply on this, or at least doesn't feel that what they have to report is up to their reporting standards quite yet, well, the people feel differently.
Yeah. What's interesting to me, and there's a comment from one of our listeners or viewers, the fact that Trump feels the need to redact the names in the document stinks of guilt. I mean, I think that the fact that his name is not popping up in more documents, when we know his name is in there thousands and thousands of times, I'd love to just know an answer for that. I'd love to know from Congress why they believe that they can redact the president's name out of these files if he has nothing to hide. That would be one of my questions.
Sure. And a bunch of weird, were they blanket rules that they just applied? So people on the internet found, and I don't have a great example offhand, but I have seen this, where the thing underneath the redaction, grammatically, the only thing it makes any sense to be is the word don't, right? So that doesn't make a lot of sense as a general keyword that you're going to redact until you think about how OCR reads apostrophes and how it sometimes misses them. And you get not don't, but don T. I mean, I don't know for sure these things, but I've seen some
really interesting. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's really interesting. And see, those are the kinds of clues that could kind of break something wide open if we saw trends in them and then could link them back to other things, So, I mean, what you guys need to understand is, and I think I said this early in the, when we started broadcasting, is that Rye and I are linking up to do this stuff together. And, I'm going to have a lot of questions for things I would, as a journalist, want to know. And he's going to be sitting down here in our cabins with me. And we're going to be talking through what kinds of things we think we can explore with a data scientist in the room with his skill sets and my ability to understand where trends might go from illegal actions. I've covered crime in the past, and so I think that probably what we're doing is sort of combining our investigative skills. And I would bet to say that we're going to be exploring a lot of things that we're not going to talk about tonight. But what we do want is we want people to know how they can use this information to educate themselves. And because this hive mentality of moving this ball forward requires a lot of people looking for things. And sometimes it might just be a regular person who goes, I found this in 10 documents and it sounded peculiar to me. What do you think it means? And sending it on to us. And we go, oh, well, let's run it through this database and see if it means anything. And next thing you know, you find something, because you really are trying to find needles in haystacks, right?
Yeah, lots of haystacks, not a lot of needles, some redacted needles. If people, the tips and, following up on other major reporting has been some of the most interesting of the reports. This Michael Wolff investigation is primarily the result of, I follow Ellie Leonard. That's how I got into Substack. I think she's a great storyteller. So she's been digging into the Michael Wolff involvement. So I wanted to just get a list of all communications, anything, just a complete sort of profile on what is in there.
And then pulling it together for her so she can utilize it. And you're going to send it to her. I can see that.
I hope so. Yeah. I mean, I posted a link to it. I don't know if she sees it, but maybe it'll help other people find similar things and they can sort of digest the elements. Her chat's very active.
Yeah. I just want to take a few questions from some people who are on here. And before I get to that, I wanted to ask you one more question. Congress. Oh, scared the dogs. Congress. What do we know about this process that you're going through from a data standpoint that makes you ask questions to Congress? What do you think we need to know about what their role should be at this point?
Well, I mean, the House Oversight Committee is doing some really good work. They're the only ones that I can see that are trying to make an effort. They've voted to subpoena Pam Bondi, which is, sensible, given how these files were handled. There are a lot of tough questions that have to be answered. The public have a right to know what those answers are, in my opinion. It seems to be going awfully slowly. And I don't know if that's just them getting sandbagged. They're getting slowed down by other forces that would have this information not come out. Or, are they actually themselves having difficulty aggregating all of the data in these files and, putting it together in a nice little sort of shopping list, a witness briefing or whatever. So I want to do whatever I can to help. I think, I really do believe in the system of government. I think the U.S. Constitution is one of the most brilliant things ever written.
Do you, Rye, do you think, have any people in Congress or U.S. Senate reached out to you to understand this any better? Because they're clearly probably not delving into it the way you are.
No, and they have not reached out, but I did initially. My first efforts were, hoping progress would be made in Congress. So I would get lists of EFTA numbers that would contain maybe likely perpetrators. It's hard to tell for certain. And then I would send those to Congress. I got a couple of messages back from Stansbury and Ro Khanna's
communication folks.
Yeah, their staff, but no follow-ups from there. But they had my GitHub. It was at the time. I don't think I'd threaded through the full website. So maybe it's time to message again, or maybe that word will get there with this podcast.
Well, we'll keep building this podcast once a week, and they're going to start noticing. And you guys are going to help us. You guys are going to actually help us do that. You're going to spread the word about what we're doing. And you're going to get people to sign up to our Substacks. And obviously, the bigger we get, the more they cannot avoid paying attention to what we're talking about. And it's good for us too. So it's something we're committed to doing. And I can still continue to do the stuff that I'm doing when he's down here, because he's going to be doing his databases while he's sitting in his cabin. And in my writer's cabin, I'm going to do my stories. And a couple times a day, maybe once at breakfast and once at dinner, we're going to reunite and say, what did we find today? What did you find today? What do we need to explore? And then some reporting skills might come in, and we might be talking to people, and we might go, oh, we found these documents are really interesting. Maybe Thomas Massey will come on and talk to us about those, right? And maybe we'll find some story threads that could be really interesting. Like Mr. Sullenberg is doing that kind of work, and I think that kind of work is the kind of stuff that we want to start trying to do. And the one thing I think you guys need to recognize about us is that we're both in this really early. Obviously, Rye's in it a month really hard, but just in data. And I've not been covering the story, and I'm really reluctant to go beyond what I think I can accomplish. But I think with the two of us working together, we might be able to make some headway. Let's talk about a couple of these questions. Holly's got about some of them written down because they just fly by me on my screen. I can't see them all. She'll speak up so you can hear it, Rye.
All right. So first question is, how long do you guys plan to work together?
We don't know. We're going to work together until we, until we, I think that for us, it's until we run out of great stories or until there's more accountability. Does that seem fair to you, Rye?
Yeah, that's a good goal there. Certainly something needs to happen here. I'm in it to make a dent in this fight. If we can accelerate this process even a little bit, then I think we owe it to future generations to make sure this never happens again.
And I think, one thing Ryan and I talked about yesterday and this morning is that, this is the kind of story that, I'm actually quite happy that Ro Khanna and Thomas Massey have been working on this together bipartisanly, because I think that this is the kind of story that it's really easy. If you are leaning one side or another, you can just go after one set of group of people and leave out the other. And although I can't stand Donald Trump and I think he's a pedophile, I also think that there are people on the other side who are going to be very surprised by some of the people who show up on this list when they finally come out. And I think they will come out. I think these are the kinds of stories that are going to, the longer you bury them, the more people dig into them. And the more you dig into them, the more likely they are to come out. Time is just part of the process. I know it's been going on for years, but there has never been a flashpoint like right now for these stories to gather momentum. And if you don't believe me, ask yourself why he's so worried about the midterm elections. Ask yourself why we're going to war in places like Iran. Ask yourself why we're going to, to pick up a dude and his wife in Venezuela, right? And ask yourself why we're hitting fishing boats off the coast of Venezuela when we know that they have no evidence to the contrary. And if they do, they haven't shared it with us. And if it's one thing we know about these people, if they think they're right, they share stuff with you. If they don't think they're right, they hide things from you. That's just a really easy way of looking at it. But people on both sides of the political spectrum are going to be rolled up into this, and that's just the way it's going to be. And I think Rye and I committed early on that that's the way we have to treat this whole thing too. You wanted to comment on that?
I agree with you completely. We can't come at this with any conclusions that are not supported by the facts, the data. We can come at it with theories and investigate those theories and not let any, preconceived notions determine what we find and report. So if, we're searching for, like I did early on, I just got a full list of every, I think it was all three branches actually, judicial, executive, and legislative, anyone in the top tier of the federal government. I just did a search and got, okay, maybe it's just news stories, but let's just find everybody. The judicial is particularly important because maybe these people were the ones heading up the, the original redactors. But, we've got to come at it from a nonpartisan point of view. This is not a problem of left and right. They'd love us to keep fighting between left and right so they can keep running off with all the green.
Yeah. And the most important thing is that we have 1,000 young ladies who are now middle-aged women, and some moving well beyond that have been waiting for 20 and 30 years as this thing played itself out. They were 12 and 13 and 14 and 15, 16 and 17, up in that sort of Megyn Kelly gives you relief age frame, where she thinks anybody over 14 should know what they're doing. Yeah, I think that's the most important focus we need to understand, is that while it is a political football for all of the people involved, it is ultimately a story about accountability. If the rule of law matters in this country, you remember when Donald Trump said early on in his running for the first term he said he wanted to be the rule of law president. Holy fuck, what contradictions we have now. But nonetheless, if these folks really are serious about the rule of law, then we need to help them hold themselves accountable to it. So what's the next question?
Okay, so Rye, a lot of people are concerned.
Let's see Holly here, just so you guys can see she's, my sidekick, Laurel and Hardy.
Which one am I?
I don't know.
Is there a better looking one? That would be you. Okay, so
let's move on.
Buttering them up.
Let's move on.
A lot of people are concerned both for your personal safety and for the, I guess I'll call it, safety of your computers and files. Are you doing anything about that? Are you worried?
Everything's open source. That's I realized early on, there's no way that I could do this under some pseudonym or, behind a mask or something. It's just to the level of the institutions that are involved here. It would make somebody crazy to be doing this in secret. So I had to use my public, my real name. I wanted to use my real credentials. People would take it seriously. I follow the tech world principle, build in public. So my databases have been forked by dozens of people. It's all open source. Every piece of information that I'm able to sort of tease out of the data in a structured format, sans, except for the victim identifiable information. I have scrubbed the GitHub history up to that point. But everybody else already has a copy of this. It's like 17 gigs of the structured versions. And then I know for sure many people have the original files backed up. I have one backup off of my main server. I'm certainly not worried about the safety of the data. In terms of safety for myself, I think, this information is already public. I don't have any piece of information that the whole world didn't get on, is it January 30th?
But it is fair to say that there's probably millions of documents that people still haven't fully gotten through, because most people don't understand what 1 million documents is. It's a lot, and you could have hundreds of thousands of people going through 1 million documents, still take a while. And the thing is that there's no pre-designated way that everybody's collaborating with each other. So it takes a long time to get through these documents, and you might miss a lot of stuff for a long period of time. The other thing I would say is that, you know, in terms of the safety, well, you can continue to talk about your personal safety. You didn't really answer that. I mean, you did a little bit of it.
You know, personal, I suppose, like, you know, legality wise, you know, I've made clear that these reports are AI generated. Anything that I'm writing with my own voice is going to have a higher sort of editorial standard. And, you know, I just make it clear that, you know, everything is linked from the source document. So you should be able to validate it yourself, take it with a grain of salt. It's fairly good, if I do say so, but, you know, it is AI generated and it should be checked. So in terms of, you know, defamation or anything, you know, I think I'm on fairly solid ground.
Well, you're just compiling documents so that people can look at them. Where the defamation, or as we would call it, defamation or libel, comes in is when we use that documentation to make to tell stories about things that are happening, and we make errors in that have repercussions to particular people.
Okay.
So if I were telling a story, for instance, about Bill Clinton, let's just say, and there was documents that said Bill Clinton was on Epstein Island three times. We saw it in the flight logs, and we know that plane landed at this place because it's in the flight logs. I'd feel safe saying that. But would I feel safe saying Bill Clinton had sex with a minor because he went down to Epstein Island? That's where you run into libel and those kinds of things. So that's where I come in for you guys listening in. You know, my job is to make sure that we don't make those mistakes as well. So in terms
Claude is quite careful of things like that.
Yeah,
you know, Claude is ultimately sort of a scientist in its basest form. So
yeah,
it's, you really have to encourage it to draw connections when there aren't any.
Yeah. But I'm saying if we draw connections ourselves by looking at certain documents, it's where we have to be super careful. In terms of safety here with me, I just have to say really clearly, I'm 58 years old. I've covered war for 30 years. I've been in vehicles with the Taliban. I've been blindfolded by the insurgents in Iraq. I've been in vehicles that were blown up. I've been shot in Ramadi. I've had members of my team kidnapped. I've had a correspondent that worked with me at some point, sexually assaulted in Egypt. I've been through a lot, and I've personally been shot. And so I'm not worried about the Trump administration. I think the kind of work that I did conditioned me to think that I've had a wonderful life and been to, dozens and dozens of countries, and I'll probably be in a much better place in terms of understanding the world than most people have ever had a chance to do it. And people pay me to do it. So I'm really comfortable with where I'm at, and my family is and always has been. And I think that you look at things that way, and we live out in the middle of nowhere. It's easy to get to us. It's not hard to find us. People know where we live. But that's just kind of comes with the territory when you're a reporter. I mean, people threaten you all the time. I've had threats all the time. We have threats. People would say things like, "I know your address. I'm coming to see you," kind of stuff. You're barking up the wrong tree, man. I'm not that dude. I grew up on a hockey rink in Canada, so bring it. But I think that's also like when you listen to the New York Times reporter talking to Donald Trump the other day. I think he's that kind of guy. Very matter of fact. All these people. You say that it was this school was hit by a tomahawk missile and killed all these kids. That it was the Iranians that did it. And there's not a person in your administration, sir, that supports that decision. What do you have to say about that? I mean, now the press corps is largely inept and can't ask those questions because they're all sycophants in the room. And, but good reporters don't worry about that shit. They let that shit fly, and they ask a question and they move on to the next topic. And, the important thing to recognize in those kind of press conferences, getting a little off topic, is that he has the bullhorn. If you notice that video, if you guys remember that guy asking that question, notice that he had his hand on the microphone, and notice that the woman who worked for the president also had her hand on the microphone, and she would not let that microphone go because they want to have total control. If they need to stop him from asking a question or a follow-up, they want to be able to yank it out of his hands so that when he does yell out the question, nobody can hear it, and the bully pulpit has the only microphone at that point. So this is all designed. I've been through it 1,000 times in 20 different countries. These people don't intimidate me, and they're not going to intimidate me or my family or the people I work with. We're not going to allow it. So, but thank you for being concerned. I know you guys write us all the time and talk about that kind of stuff. Yeah, thank you, Eric Winchester. Yeah, I was hit by a Peterbilt truck. Yeah, that's for another day. On a motorcycle, head on. But Okay, and Eric knows that because he stayed here a couple nights ago. He's also a motorcycle guy like us. Okay, what other questions, honey? We'll go about 3 more, and then we're going to let everybody go. Hopefully, you guys are enjoying what we're talking about, and you're going to understand where we're going with this over the coming weeks.
Okay, so Rye, and this is a really good question. I mean, considering what's happening with, the DOJ and Anthropic right now, how are you going to defend the data validity, given what's at stake here, and when they try to discredit the data?
Well, so it's designed in such a way that that's pretty hard to do. It's not the person that's writing it that's to be discredited, whether that's Claude's not a person, but it's not the entity writing it, whether that's a human or a machine. Everything is individually cited, and it links back to DOJ. So you don't have to take our word for it. The documents from the horse's mouth that they've released. You can ask questions about those documents, but you can't claim they don't exist.
Yeah, and and the other answer to that too is that it's the controversy is not in the data that's being compiled by Rye. The controversy is the inferences that you draw from that data. So as a reporter, we have to draw very careful inferences from what we see, and that's my job. And we did it. I did it for 15 years at 60 Minutes, and you'd always have people say things weren't right or whatever. But we trust me, 60 Minutes doesn't lose lawsuits. The only lawsuit that they've lost in the last 25 years is when Barry Weiss took over CBS. Or excuse me, just before Barry Weiss took over CBS, the Redstone family still owned Paramount, and Trump forced them into a settlement so that the deal would go through between them and Paramount Skydance. They forced them to have a $16 million settlement on a story about Kamala Harris, which made no legal sense, and they would never have lost. I promise you. It was about how Trump said that they misled the public through the edit. And I did a whole reel on that. If you guys want to see it, it was early on. I did a reel on Kamala Harris and that 60 Minutes controversy, and it was complete, utter fucking bullshit. And nobody at 60 wanted to settle. In fact, they all were like, let's go to court. We'll have depositions. But the Redstone family wanted that however many $1 billion it was by closing that deal. And they did. And as soon as they closed it, the conservative Trump supporting Ellison family took over CBS News, hired Barry Weiss as editor-in-chief. And she's never once worked in broadcast journalism, and suddenly became editor-in-chief of Broadcast Network with the likes of Walter Cronkite and Edward R. Murrow's name, and overnight has ruined it. And when she started CBS Evening News several weeks later, their ratings dropped 24% in 1 week. So that's what it is. And 60 Minutes is continuing to deal with an uphill battle as it relates to her. We'll talk about that more in future episodes, but trust me, I'm leaning in and I'm talking to people about it. So anyways, what other questions, honey?
Well, this isn't a question, but a lot of people keep asking for the site again. So it's Epstein-data.com. 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 And that'll get you where you need to go. Is that right? And you got other.
That's correct. I should probably make a document 0 or something and have it redirect over here or something, so it's a little bit more recognizable and memorable.
But we'll start doing that. Like next week, we'll maybe put one up on screen.
Someone who could do that, right?
Yeah, if only we knew somebody who could do that.
Yeah, it's true. It'll take me 5 minutes.
I'll post the link when we'll post this recording tomorrow across platforms, and I will put that website in the write-up.
Yeah.
Okay.
One more. Let's go with one more here.
One more. Kind of answered. Well, I guess just hit it again as a closing. What's your ultimate goal with all of this?
See if I can help. I saw that Roger Sullenberger had cited my report. That's when I started taking myself a little bit more seriously. If somebody is able to uncover these things because of how I've laid out the data and how Claude and I have indexed things, or if indeed these reports are helping, I just have an obligation to continue. So I want to see some accountability, some justice for the victims. I want the answer. I want to know what was really happening here. I mean, there's so much that we don't know, despite having 3 million pages.
Especially with 3 million pages with heavy redactions through a lot of them.
Right. Some of them make no sense.
Yeah. And I would say to that, like, this is the importance of, this is my second swing and a miss at support, but if you guys understand the importance of what's going on in the media landscape right now. So just last week, it looked like the deal is going to go through when they announced that Netflix stepped out of the deal for purchase of Warner Brothers, which means now that Paramount Skydance, which bought 60 Minutes or CBS, will now own HBO, they'll own CNN, all those networks. And, David Ellison, the chairperson or CEO, whatever his title is, has said that he's going to keep CNN independent because he's seen the fallout from CBS, but it's too late now. They've already fucked that up. So all these organizations are getting bought up. We're going to have more and more Fox Newses in the world. And if you're a Fox News supporter, congratulations. You'll have all sorts of things to choose from. But if you want independent reporting, it's slowly going away. That's the reason you're seeing places like Substack take off, because reporters are quitting. They're quitting. They're saying, I'm not going to work in a place where I can't think independently and where you're telling me how to work and what to think about. And that's a problem. So people like myself who are building this thing that we're building, a reluctant retirement, coming out of retirement to do this stuff. But there are also some great reporters out there like Jim Acosta from CNN, who was doing some incredible work at CNN and left there. And now he's on his own, doing his own thing. And you've got the young kids like Aaron Parnas, who is every day he gets up and cranks out 4 or 5 pieces. And some of them are repeating things that other people have said. And sometimes he's going and doing a lot of independent reporting, but he's just staying at it. He's keeping people informed. And, if you look at Mr. Global, who's hitting the energy thing really hard every day, with that great sarcasm he has, it's like, I wish I had, I'm pretty good at sarcasm, but he's really great at it. You look at Joyce Vance on the legal side, and these people are there. I can promise you, my wife would tell you, I'm putting in 12 to 16 hours a day easily. And on top of that, we're running our cabin business. It's a lot of work. I don't sleep much. So, when people say, oh, I wish this was free, like, we're trying to give you as much stuff as we can free, but we're also trying to, make a living so that we can keep doing this work. So I think and I say that because, a couple of days ago, Rye had 100 subscribers, none of which were paid. So if you can afford like $5 a month, which is like one coffee, smile for them, Rye, just give them a smile. $5 a month to Rye subscription, you'll have exclusivity to, looking at a lot of his stuff, and we're going to be working together. So, consider it an upgrade of our account. And we will at some point have to throttle some of this stuff. Otherwise, we won't be able to continue doing, like, we have to buy software, and, I constantly having to buy all sorts of new software for the phone so we can do that. Just this little program you're looking at right now, we have a monthly subscription of that on top of all the work that we do. And we're not getting paid for our time like we used to. So please go on his page if you can and subscribe. And if you like what you're doing, get a paid subscription for $5. For me, I'm always saying, give me some money so I can feed, Georgie. And Rye's got a cute little puppy there too. What's her name?
His name's Bear, Baby Bear. He was my.
Just show him real quick, and we'll let everybody go.
Oh, show Bear. Bear, come.
This is going to get you like 10 subscriptions tonight. A lot of grandmas out there. What your dog?
I would like to see people guess how old they think he is. Look into the camera. How old
I
do you
know.
think
So I'm not going to say. Any guesses on there? Anybody? Anybody say anything, honey?
Well, there's a delay.
There's a little delay, so just give us a couple seconds. We're going to see if anybody
We got
knows.
a 12, 16, someone says. 8.
Okay, someone got it. Yeah, he's a 16-year-old dog.
16-year-old dog.
No one thinks he's young. Let's say that.
So he's got to get special treatment, right? He's probably losing his teeth. So hook a brother up and get on a subscription. I know you guys are taking care of me too, but take care of my partner, because we got to travel him down here and put him up and feed him. He's got to drive his car down from whatever state he's living in, which we're not going to say. And anyways, so we like you guys to keep following us on this Epstein journey we're on, and we'll have another podcast tomorrow night, I believe, if we can get our other person, not with you, Ryan, another podcast for from the Writer's Cabin. Anyways, from the Writer's Cabin, you guys, thanks very much, and we'll see you soon. And keep following what we're doing. And thanks. If you like what we're doing, please comment and let people know and share it with people. And there you go. Thanks, guys. Take care.
You can stay on.
Thank you so much.
Stay on, Rye.
Okay.